I am privileged this morning to read from Isaiah 11, verses 1 through 10. Out of the stump of David's family will grow a shoot, yes, a new branch bearing fruit from the old root. And the Spirit of the Lord will rest on him, the Spirit of wisdom and understanding, the Spirit of counsel and might, the Spirit of knowledge and the fear of the Lord. He will delight in obeying the Lord. He will not judge by appearance, nor make a decision based on hearsay. He will give justice to the poor and make fair decisions for the exploited. The earth will shake at the force of his word, and one breath from his mouth will destroy the wicked. He will wear righteousness like a belt and truth like an undergarment. In that day the wolf and the lamb will live together. The leopard will lie down with the baby goat. The calf and the yearling will be safe with the lion, and a little child will lead them. The cow will graze near the bear. The cub and the calf will lie down together. The lion will eat hay like a cow. The baby will play safely near the hole of a cobra. Yes, a little child will put its hand in a nest of deadly snakes without harm. Nothing will hurt or destroy in all my holy mountain, for as the waters fill the sea, so the earth will be filled with people who know the Lord. And that day the heir to David's throne will be a banner of salvation to all the world. The nations will rally to him, and the land where he lives will be a glorious place. This is the word of the Lord.
An unthinkable, marvelous, wonderful thing happened on Christmas Eve, 1914, roughly 5 months into the Great War. Throughout Belgium, along the Western Front, English, French, and German troops were fighting in trench warfare. It was a bloody enterprise. By the end of the war, 4 years later, over 9 million combatants and 7 million civilians had lost their lives. 16 million people. But on Christmas Eve, 1914, a most unexpected thing happened. It seems that at various points along the Western Front, the Christmas Eve parties, which had begun inside the trenches of English, French, and German troops, spilled over out into no man's land, which is what they called the land between the trenches where the battle actually took place. And there, as the troops gathered onto no man's land, they called a truce for a night. At several places along the Western Front in Belgium, as they joined together in no man's land and spilled out of their trenches, they exchanged trinkets and tobacco, and they drank champagne together. They told stories and shared pictures of their families back home. History says that they worshiped together, and that each side allowed the other to bury their dead. And they exchanged POWs that evening. Historians call this the Christmas Eve Truce. A few years ago, I stumbled on a French film. It was made in 2005. The title of the film is Joyeux Noël with an X, or Merry Christmas, which remembers this event. I thought we would do something a little different today. I'd like to show you a few minutes of a clip in this movie, Joyeux Noël, which recounts the Christmas Eve Truce, 1914.
Die scheinen ja mächtig zu feiern da drüben. Habt ihr nicht auch Lust dazu? Das ist Anna Sörensen.
Guten Abend.
Guten Abend. Guten Abend.
Was soll das? Sind Sie noch bei Trost, diese Dame hierher zu bringen?
Herr Oberleutnant, ich habe den Kronprinzen davon überzeugen können, dass ein bisschen Musik hier am Heiligen Abend nicht schaden könnte.
Gut. Dann trällern Sie mal los.
Mon lieutenant, venez voir vite. Il se passe quelque chose de bizarre en face.
J'aime pas bien ça, mon lieutenant. C'est peut-être une diversion vu d'un sale coup, non?
Kommen Sie da runter!
Adeste fideles, leti triumphantes, venite, venite in Angelorum, venite adoramus, venite adoramus, venite adoramus, Dominum.
Guten Abend, Engländer! Good evening, Germans. But we're not English, we're Scottish.
So, das war ja ganz schön, aber jetzt gehen wir wieder zurück. Das ist hier nicht die Berliner Oper.
Sie haben recht. Das hier ist besser als Berlin.
Ça alors, c'est encore plus fort. Une réunion au sommet sur le Nomasland, puis on n'est même pas invité.
Ça ferme, Ponchel. C'est quoi ce bordel?
Good evening. Do you speak English?
Yes, a little.
Wonderful. We were talking about a ceasefire for Christmas Eve. What do you think? The outcome of this war won't be decided tonight. I don't think anyone would criticize us for laying down our rifles on Christmas Eve.
Don't worry. It is just for tonight.
I'm sure it happened just like that. Seriously, though, history says that for one night, these three different armies played soccer together in no man's land, got to know each other as human beings. It's almost unbelievable that this happened in a war zone. No. Almost just as unbelievable is the words of Isaiah the prophet in our text for today. Isaiah said to the people of his day that a little child would lead them. You might remember in the text from last week, Isaiah says, "A child will be born to us, a son will be given to us. The government will rest on his shoulders. His name will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. A son will be given us." And then 2 chapters later in the text we read today, a little boy will lead them. He keeps coming back to children. Now we can romanticize children all we want to, but children are hard work, I'm learning. One of the reasons children are so difficult is because of their imagination. Have you ever noticed that? It's a child's imagination that leads them to all the why questions which drive us up the wall. Daddy, if the earth is round, why is the ground flat? Mommy, why do dogs bark and cats meow? If clouds are water, how can it be cloudy and not rain? Can any of you help me with any of those? When was the last time you asked yourself those questions? Do you know why we don't ask ourselves those questions? Because our imaginations have atrophied. We know how the world works and therefore lose the capacity to think outside the bounds. But children have this amazing capacity to imagine the world other than the way it is. Their minds can take them to the boundaries of reality, and they push those boundaries until they stretch or sometimes break down altogether, and then you have a brand new world. Children ask, why? Because they do not assume everything that we assume. They ask why because they see possibilities when we see limitations. Children are born with this innate capacity to imagine and think creatively. And then we come along and tend to educate their imaginations right out of them. We, in both our churches and our educational systems, teach children that other forms of thinking are more important than imagination. Deductive reasoning, inductive reasoning, problem solving, comprehension, analysis. That's what you get in the education so prominent in our culture. And all of those forms of thinking are important and necessary. We need those. But we do not teach our children to imagine. In fact, we teach our children to grow out of their imagination. I think we tend to teach children to stop imagining because we see imagination as an escape from reality. And we want our children to be conditioned to live in reality, not have to escape it. We're all a little uncomfortable with a 45-year-old woman whose best friend is a sugar plum fairy named Nancy. But I'm not talking about imagination that escapes reality. I'm talking about imagination which redefines reality, which expands the border of what we call reality, understanding that what we call reality is a human construct. 500 years ago, reality was that the world was flat and that the sun revolved around, or that the earth, that the sun revolved around the earth, and anyone with eyes to see could see it. That was reality. Until some scientists looked at some data and used their imagination and said, why? Why? Sounds like a 4-year-old in the back seat. Do you know what Einstein said about imagination? Einstein said, and I quote, "Imagination is more important than knowledge, for knowledge is limited to all we now know or understand, while imagination embraces the entire world and all there ever will be to know and understand." Unquote. A scientist, Einstein, steeped in scientific theory, is saying that imagination is more important than reason and understanding. This child that Isaiah keeps talking about seems to be leading an exercise in the imagination, or as some might claim, an exercise in absurdity. Did you hear the things that Isaiah says in this text? The wolf will lie down with the lamb. The leopard will lie down with the baby goat. The calf and the lamb and the lion together. The cow and the bear will graze. The lion will eat straw like an ox. The infant child will play with cobras. Isn't that the craziest thing you've ever heard? It's nonsense. Wolves and lambs taking naps together. Vegetarian lions. It sounds like a children's book to me. It sounds like Narnia, or I'm in Wonderland with Alice, or maybe some Dr. Seuss book. This just isn't the way it works. We all know the nature of lions, and we all know the nature of lambs, and we know what happens when you place them together in the same pen. It tends not to work out well for the lambs. I know the nature of bears, and I know that straw is not in their diet, and I would never, ever, under any circumstances, allow a child to play near a den of cobras. Who would? This scene is an exercise in imagination, to be sure, but it seems short on good sense. It seems strange at best and absolutely absurd, if not suicidal, at worst. It's strange. Kind of like peace. Peace is a wonderful concept, a nice ideal. It works in children's books when you're in Narnia and Wonderland or wherever it is Isaiah's trying to take us. But we in this room don't read children's books. We read the newspaper. And the newspaper is heavy on rationale and light on imagination. It takes exactly 0 ounces of imagination to comprehend a newspaper. You don't need imagination for a newspaper. And what the newspaper tells us is that this week, 14 people were shot and killed in San Bernardino, California. The newspaper tells us that terrorism is alive and well on nearly every continent on this globe. The newspaper says that there are bombs being dropped in Syria and no doubt more to come. The newspaper reminds us that lions still have a taste for blood, not grass, and wolves and lambs are hardly taking naps together in our world. This talk of peace is so strange to us, which is why the moment we begin talking about peace, we start the what ifs. Have you noticed that? The moment you begin talking about peace, the other person is bound to say, well, what if? What if they shoot first? What if a bomb is dropped? What if someone breaks in your home? And so, because we can't imagine alternatives in those scenarios, we go around saying that peace cannot work in our world. But that cannot and must not be acceptable to us as people who are following Jesus. Because the assumption behind the phrase peace can't work in this world is that other solutions do. The problem with violence, brothers and sisters, is that violence begets violence in some unholy cycle that is so very difficult to break. How many wars have been the war to end all wars? What we discover is that the war isn't the war to end all wars. It's the war that leads to the next war. Brothers and sisters, peace is not impossible in our world. Peace is not impossible in our world. It's just very, very difficult. And sometimes we say things are impossible because we never wanted to try them in the first place. But we as people of peace who are called to be peacemakers will never engage the struggle for peace when we've lost the capacity to even imagine it. We will be slaves to the reptilian parts of our brains that says fight or flight until we spend some time in the depths of our brain thinking about third ways in the world, creative solutions. Have you ever noticed that reptiles are not known for their creativity? When we respond reflexively, how different are we than a rattlesnake? We need someone to help us. We need someone to help us reimagine the world, to reimagine possibilities, to reimagine the other, to reimagine our lives which are bound together in one creation. We need someone to grant us the courage to try peace before we denounce it. We need someone to break our hunger and thirst for violence and to help us make friends with this strange peace. We need someone to stand up in what we call reality and ask why. I don't know who will do it. My money's on a child. Sure, we can say that Isaiah has completely lost his mind. We can say that Isaiah has gone mad with this creative vision, insane maybe. But what if we compared Isaiah's imagination with our logic? Brothers and sisters, we all live in a country which has seen over 300 mass shootings in this calendar year. When mass shooting is defined as more than 4 people being killed in one setting. We've had over 300, some estimations say over 350, which is more than the days we've had in this year. We live in a country where the long shadows of war darken the brief periods of peace. We live in a country and a state where we kill people who killed people because we think it's wrong to kill people. Talk about cycles. We live in a culture which is neck deep in violence. Now we can do some soul searching today, and I hope we will, and I hope it starts with me. We can do some soul searching today and ask ourselves, who is truly mad? On Christmas Eve, 1914, I don't know who was the first person to step out of their trench and step onto no man's land. I don't know who that was. But that one man stepped out of his trench, and when he did so, no man's land was no longer no man's land, because one person had made that courageous decision to step out. And before the night was over, no man's land had become every man's land. I'm sure some people said that one man was crazy, nuts, a loon. But consider this. After that night was over, after a Christmas Eve in which these men looked each other in the eyes and exchanged gifts and pictures and stories and laughed together and cried together and observed the Latin Mass together, after that night was over, all those people went back into their trenches, and at the orders of their higher-ups, who didn't like it in the first place, continued the war. Now, who is mad? Where is the madness in this scene? For one night, December 24th, 1914, in the middle of war, peace broke out. For one night, peace was no longer abnormal. It was the new normal. For one night, lions ate grass. And the lambs and the goats and the bears and the wolves all laid down in the same pen. Do you know where I first learned of this story? Do you know where I heard it? Not in C.S. Lewis' Narnia, not in a fanciful children's book. I first learned this story in a newspaper. I read about it in the paper. Some people say stories like the Christmas Eve Truce are the exception, not the rule. And no doubt they're right. But what if we had so many exceptions that we made new rules? Some people say, oh, this is impossible. But what if we had someone to show us what really is possible in this world? Someone who could revive our imagination rather than just exercise the snake brain in our brains. What if we had someone who could help us dream again? Someone who could lead us into a new normal? What would happen? What if we had someone like a child, who could help us to ask why? Or maybe why not? Once more. What would happen? I don't know. But I think we should think on it for a few more minutes this morning.
Sing für uns. Sing für sie.
Pax Domini, sit semper vobiscum.
Et cum spiritu tuo.
Ite missa est.
Benedictamus Dominus Deus gratias.
Brothers and sisters, it is time for peace. Our Lord calls us to peace. I wonder if you would respond privately in the depths of your souls today. Or if you would respond to the peace that only Christ gives for the very first time in your life. Or joining a community that's seeking peace in the depths of our souls and reaches the ends of the earth. However the Spirit is whispering to you today, I invite you to respond.